would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to Tuesday, everybody. If your name is Stephanie, and you went ahead and clicked that little red button at the top of the page over at therebelbroker.com titled Take the Survey to Support the Show, please check your email inbox. I'm talking to you, Stephanie. You have a $50 Amazon gift card waiting to get sent to you as soon as you reply to that email so that I know that there's a real human being. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and congratulate Stephanie because I have yet to have someone not reply. I'm thinking everybody who goes to that kind of trouble, it sends me a real address, so I'm assuming we're good. So I'm looking forward to being able to congratulate Stephanie with that $50 Amazon gift card. For those of you who are just joining the show, what the heck is he talking about? Well, it's quite simple. I'm hoping that I can get the show to grow, and in order to do that, I'm getting demographic information on folks who listen. So if you go to the website, therebelbroker.com, go to the top of the page, click the red button that says Take the Survey to Support the Show. You'll be asked your email address twice, use the same one both times, and you'll get a handful of questions to answer, all of the demographic variety. If you do that, you will get put into the list of folks from which I will draw a single name each month. And the person I draw will win a $50 Amazon gift card. We have now given out, are we up to 5? I think we're up to 5 now. Was it 4? Or are we up to 6? I think it's 5. In any event, it's a pile of money. And I am very happy to use that as a way to thank folks who go to the trouble of jumping through the survey hoops. So thank you very much. Congrats to those who've won, including Stephanie, because I'm sure she'll get back to me. And to those of you who will be winning next month. So we've taken care of March. April, we'll do this all over again. So please do feel free to go over to the site, therebelbroker.com, and click that red button, and you will be in the running. In fact, I noticed when I randomly picked Stephanie that she was one of the folks who apparently only registered within the last few days. So great for her. Quick payoff for Stephanie. In addition to being able to do that at the website, you can also get in contact with me. Go ahead and click Contact in the menu bar, and you'll get an opportunity to send me any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have, and I'll be happy to reply. So feel free to take advantage of that if you are so motivated. We are going to spend a little bit of time talking about credit again. And again, we're not even repeating ourselves. We may repeat ourselves a little bit just to bring you up to speed, particularly if you're someone who hasn't been listening for a while. This is a long, long story. This has been evolving for a while. We did a show last week, in fact, where we talked about the fact that credit ratings have kind of started getting manipulated so that they don't reflect reality as much as they used to. Now, I've done several shows where we talked about the details and the specific ways in which the credit rating system is being tweaked to make folks with lower scores achieve higher scores, and not in a way that's more accurately reflecting their credit worthiness. I think that's the most important thing to point out. Now, the reason we bring this up is because the last time we went through this, the last big downturn, we simply embraced this idea that we should go with folks who have lower credit scores. Everything we read about actions being taken by the government, in fact, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, is all aimed towards reaching out to more buyers. And as I mentioned yesterday, when you're reaching out to new buyers or more buyers, they're not talking about reaching to more qualified buyers. You don't need to reach out to the qualified buyers. That when they say that, that is code for subprime lending. We want to reach out to folks who are currently not qualified or would not qualify for loans in general. And when you think about it, it's not a mean thing. I sometimes get a little confused how people ascribes like you wanting to hurt people's ability to get these things achieved in their lives. I think you do folks a lot more harm when you facilitate them borrowing way more money than they are financially mature enough to take care of. It may make you feel good. You can pat yourself on the back and say, wow, you know what? I've gotten these folks into their first home. Well, yeah, but you've also saddled them with debt that their credit information indicates is something they're probably not in a place to manage, particularly if things go wrong. Now, we should have all learned that lesson last time. It broke my heart to try to help people work through the process of bankruptcy or being completely upside down on what they owed on their home and having no resources available to them to manage that situation. And having those people having to live under those circumstances and live under the weight of that for years afterwards because they can now not borrow anything. So you're not doing folks any favors. I'm all for focusing more on educating folks on how to manage their finances and all that other kind of wonderful stuff. And then the last time we talked about this, we discussed some. I won't get into the details, but a lot of the things we discussed before related to things now being counted in your credit score that really are not credit score things, like your water bill or your power bill, things like that. Things where when you don't pay it, they simply turn it off. It's not you managing debt. And also, it's a bit of a tricky one because those are the things that nobody stops paying, right? The things that will result in your power not being on or your water not flowing, those are the last things people stop paying. They'll stop paying an awful lot of other things. And one of the other things people stop paying first, actual loans, right? Car loans, student loans, mortgages, things that are actual instruments of credit are the things that tend to suffer first when folks are making those decisions or are making poor decisions about their finances. So, and there were other things. I'll include a link to the show, I think, from late last year that talked more about that in detail, which will obviously, that show will also have links to the specifics. But let's get into some more very interesting stuff because it's kind of mind-blowing. It's actually annoying enough that it makes me want to just go take a nap. It's mind-boggling that this makes sense. Now, it's a story that comes to us from the Wall Street Journal. It's also being covered by Housing Wire. It's also being covered by, I believe, the guys at Zero Hedge. We'll go ahead and talk a little bit about that. And there's another story I wouldn't mind covering today, too, that kind of fits in with this kind of nicely, but we'll see how far we get. Now, for those of you who are not totally plugged in on what makes up your credit history, right? When people run your credit history and they want to get your credit rating, there's usually three different organizations that are part of that equation: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And they will look at these various credit ratings and mux them or mix them up in some way or average them or whatever. They're basically, as it's described by Housing Wire, financial scorecards. And here's what they're going to do. And this is mind-boggling. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion will remove tax lien and civil judgment data starting around July 21st. In an effort to help omit negative information from these financial scorecards. Let that sink in for a second. If you've got a tax lien or a civil judgment against you, they're going to start omitting them on July 1st. That's mind-blowing, particularly since most of those kinds of things, particularly tax liens, get to go to the front of the line when it comes to any credit thing. If you have a history of busting out on tax liens, I wouldn't loan you any money Because even if I was in the first mortgage position on lending you money, if you've got a tax lien, I end up in the back seat. So this is huge. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, this is just mind-boggling. The unusual move by the influential firms comes partially in response to regulatory concerns. The three reporting bureaus rarely tinker with the information that goes on credit reports, aside from just last year, and that lenders consult to gauge consumers' ability and willingness to pay back debts. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion recently decided to remove tax lien and civil judgment data starting around July 21st, according to the Consumer Data Industry Association, a trade group that represents them. The firms will do so if those data don't include a complete list of at least 3 data points: a person's name, address, and either social security number or date of birth. So I guess part of the thing here is that they're hoping to prevent issues that are not real. However, remember, they're saying at least 3 data points. And what is interesting is it changes the onus from the person who wants to get the loan to prove that wasn't them to someone else proving that it is. And I suppose that may sound more fair, but having seen data like this before, the percent of time that this is wrong is really small. So to do this as a blanket move is going to weaken the ability of financial institutions to really make a reasonable estimation on someone's credit, because for the folks who have the biggest problems with their credit, this is going to go a long way of simply getting rid of that stuff. And there's no indication, and the way this is being done, there's no indication that these folks have turned some sort of a financial corner or that they have learned some new level of responsibility relating to their debt. The level of risk that this move makes or introduces into the system is scary as all get out. Because the bottom line is this will absolutely in its nets catch people or release people, I suppose you could say, into the financial world, the riskiest borrowers out there. And here's why I say that it's potentially going to cause a huge problem. The article noted that roughly 12 million U.S. consumers, or about 6% of the total U.S. population, that has FICO credit scores, will see increases in those scores as a result of this change. That is nuts. And if you wanted to see a move that lives up to the mantra we've been hearing from so many different regulatory agencies in terms of let's make it possible for more buyers to buy, this is a huge log on that fire. Now, we're going to go ahead and talk about this a little bit more. We're going to take a really quick break, so don't go away. We'll be back right after this. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right. Aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about credit craziness. I don't get it. This is the second time in a year that we've seen all of the big credit score people embrace policies that artificially increase the credit scores of the riskiest borrowers. All the things that they've talked about. The only folks that are going to see their credit ratings boosted by this are folks who have already had really bad credit histories. This blows me away. It blows me away. Now, do I think that there should be a much more robust review process of incorrect credit data on folks' histories? Absolutely. There should absolutely be a far more clearly thought out appeals process so that folks can get things that are not part of their credit history removed from their credit history. Totally agree with that. I do not agree with a scenario where when you consider this data and realize that even if if they just have the social security number and the name, if they only have those two things, if they have the social security number and the name and not the date of birth, they're getting rid of it. They're just, forget it. We're not researching it. We don't have all three of those. It's out. It's done. We're assuming that's not you. Horrible. Absolutely a horrible move. And we're talking about 12 million consumers suddenly getting a boost out of this, and not just your average 12 million, right? We're not going out into the world and randomly picking 12 million people. This is from the sample of folks who have had a bad credit history. So we're not picking from average Joe or Josephine American. We're picking folks who already have on their credit bad things that keep them from being able to borrow money. And we're just tossing it. We're assuming that information is just not right and tossing it. Given what we know, given what we should have learned over the last 10 years, this is freaking nuts. Okay. Of course, as this article points out, this falls in line with recent attempts from the government to widen the credit box. And to translate that, we already talked a little bit about that. When you talk about widening the credit box, you are not talking about enabling qualified buyers to borrow. You are not. You don't need to widen that box. Qualified borrowers are already qualified. So instead of using that term, they should be saying subprime borrowers, people who would not normally qualify. That is who we're talking about. Okay. Back in February, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau announced it also joined a growing chorus of groups trying to expand debt access for consumers who lack enough loan history to obtain a credit score. Okay. So I don't know how many times I can say this blows me away, but it does. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this is a Wall Street Journal story that they're talking about. I'm going to include links to the Wall Street Journal in case you are a subscriber. If not, I'm also going to include two other articles that are covering this. I happen to be a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, so I can read that entire article. Let's see. Credit, and I'm looking now at the Wall Street Journal article to see if there's any other sexy points here. And there's actually a few little tidbits on this that I thought would be neat. Credit reports will soon ignore many civil judgments and tax liens lodged against consumers. Estimates of how much each is worth on average. Federal tax liens, $69,000, and for the average person that's in this boat. State tax liens, $5,000. Civil judgments, $7,000. Changes coming around July 1st are expected to raise scores. Here's where it gets interesting. Wow. The estimated point score will be raised by at least 40 points. At least 40 points. That is a ton. And far more than would cover simply going from someone you can't lend to being someone you can. I mean, this could change the whole thing. That's expected to affect over 700,000 consumers. 20 points or less in terms of improvement on your credit score will apply to just under 11 million consumers. And the result is that folks who have these kinds of credit report blemishes are going to look more credit worthy. Now, of course, this is something that's intended to deal with inaccurate information, and I am totally down with that. I am not about saddling people with inaccurate data, but the idea of solving this problem through simply saying we're going to toss it all is crazy. Now, I think they have to do this because they were being sued. In 2015, the credit reporting firms reached a new settlement with the New York's Attorney General over several practices, including how they handle errors. This was followed by one with another 31 states. One more state, Mississippi, followed last year. The state settlements already had prompted the credit reporting firms to remove several negative data sets from reports. These included non-loan related items that were sent to collection firms, such as gym memberships, library fines, and traffic tickets. The firms also will have to remove medical debt collections that have been paid by a patient's insurance company from credit reports by 2018. Such changes might help borrowers and could spur additional lending, possibly boosting economic activity, but it could potentially increase risks for lenders who might not be able to accurately assess borrowers' default risks. And, at least there's some folks out here kind of calling it like it is. According to John Ulsheimer, a credit specialist and former manager at Experian and credit score creator FICO, it's going to make someone who has poor credit look better than they should. Just because the lien or judgment information has been removed and someone's score has improved doesn't mean they'll magically become a better credit risk. So let's kind of calibrate ourselves, right? What are credit scores and what makes them good? 300 to 640 is considered bad. So basically, if you were given the numbers we were talking about a minute ago, you could be at 600 or 620 and suddenly stop being a bad risk. Now, only secured loans are given for people in this range. And you could suddenly become fair. And creditors will give you a loan, but with high interest rates in that bracket. Now, the next bracket goes up to 680. So 640 to 680 is fair. The next bracket is good, 680 to 720. You'll be approved almost everywhere with good rates when you're at 680 to 720. At the 720 to 850 range, you are in the best bracket. You will get the best interest rates everywhere. Let's see here. As the Wall Street Journal said at the time, the changes are expected to boost consumer lending, especially among borrowers shut out of the market or charged high interest rates because of their low scores. Quote, it expands banks' ability to make loans for people who might not have qualified and to offer a lower price for others. Perhaps the thinking went that if you're a borrower who has defaulted once, they had learned your lesson and you'll never do it again. Unfortunately, empirical studies have shown that is not the case. Now, this is information that we're pulling out of the Zero Hedge article titled 12 Million Americans Are About to Get an Artificial Boost to Their FICO Scores. Now, nearly 3 years later, in the latest push to artificially boost FICO scores, the Wall Street Journal reports that many tax liens and civil judgments soon will be removed from people's credit reports. The latest in a series of moves, and again, we've talked about that here on the show, to omit negative information from these financial scorecards. The development could help boost credit scores for millions of consumers, but could pose risks for lenders. They basically cover some stuff that we've already talked about. The outcome of this change is clear. It will make many people who have these types of credit report blemishes look more creditworthy, as we've already discussed. And then they talk about some of the things I discussed in previous shows about past things that have been done. So where do we stand on this? Now, I'm pretty sure you all can guess where I am. I've already made that pretty clear. But once you stack this on everything else that we've discussed, mix this together, create a picture, because this is what's going to happen. Whether you're talking about 3.5% FHA loans. You blend that, and also some of these other loans we've talked about. There's farm loans out there. There were some interesting loan products in the South that were 0% loans. You blend all of this now with now remember, this plus 20 or plus 40 to your credit score doesn't include the artificial boost folks are already getting from some non-credit relating data to be included in your credit report. We talked about that one months ago. So there's that boost. Now there's this boost. Now on the last boost, nobody was giving estimates on how much they thought subprime borrowers' credit scores would be boosted by that action. But the whole point of it, the word that came down on why it was being done was to broaden access to credit for buyers, which when you translate that means to facilitate subprime lending, to allow more folks to borrow money who otherwise would not qualify. So we've got this stacking on top of each other, all these different actions that just stack one after the other to artificially boost credit scores. Now we blend that with the things that they'll be more readily able to qualify for that are already financially risky. We've talked about how that 3.5% interest rate leaves you with a home. The day escrow closes, you are underwater on that home. If you calculate in all the costs involved in selling a home, and whether it's taxes or credit or real estate agent fees, whatever, taxes, fees, title insurance, all the various things that cost you money when you sell a house, you add all of those things up. Then if that person ran into trouble within just a few weeks of closing on their home and decided, lost their job, I don't have any more money now, I'm not making enough to make this mortgage payment, they would have to write a check to somebody to buy their house. That seller would not walk away with cash. So this is a worry. It continues to set a stage that blows me away that we are sitting back and watching all of this happen and go, wait a minute, I've seen this play. It does not end well. And let's review a little bit of the market in general at this point, right? I realize I talk about this a lot, and it remains true. We're not solving the actual problem. For some reason, the solution to the problem that's offered up to us over and over again through actions like this and all the others we've talked about is to create more buyers. This is absolutely freaking nuts. We need more houses. All this action will do is to continue to artificially bloat the price of the existing inventory, which is already down. Now, we're going to talk in a minute about one area where what's going on with prices is actually kind of interesting. And this may cause a problem in that market if it really does introduce a whole lot more people who are trying to borrow money and buy a house. But what do you think about this? This is one of those subjects where I really get extreme responses from listeners. Either you're totally on board and you're like, yeah, you know what? The solution to the problem is to build more homes, to get out of the way of builders and let them build. I was reading an article the other day that what most home builders are saying is the reason why they can't build a more affordable housing is because the economy of scale doesn't work for them. A lot of them simply can't put together deals large enough where they make enough money at the end of it to warrant the effort to do it, but whether it's complying with regulations or different additional taxes they have to pay for doing construction. Remember, we've talked about how there are communities in this country where when a builder is going to build a home, a brand new home, and they're doing a development, they're being charged an extra $100,000 per house. And of course, that gets transferred directly to the buyers. The builder isn't paying that. The builder's paying it, but you're then paying the builder. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So nobody wants to talk about, I hear nothing about encouraging builders to build. I hear nothing about stepping back regulations or reducing costs relating to building to 2000 levels. Even if we just took things back to 2000 levels, the percentage increase in what it costs to build a house by a developer in the United States has gone through the roof since the year 2000. We did a show on that last year. All these barriers to solving the real problem, which is setting builders free to build more homes or encouraging them. Let's say you're not like me and you actually think that things are much better when the government is involved with them. Okay, let's get the government involved. Let's say, all right, if you build and you sell these homes, if you list them for whatever the average price is, minus 10% in the current marketplace, we will sign a tax waiver. You will not have to pay taxes on any of the money you make on that particular development. Why not? Would that not do it? I'll bet you it would. If you think that kind of manipulation of the market and how things get done is the way to do things, well, then why isn't that what's being done? Why aren't people talking about making that happen? Okay, so let's jump into the other story I had going today, which I thought was kind of interesting when you compared it to this one. This one comes to us from Home Union. We frequently get really good stories from Home Union. This one's rising home prices prompt investor exodus from the Denver market. Now, just the headline is interesting because if you're an investor, if you're an investment-minded person, that should really start things rolling in your head. Why would investors back out of a marketplace? I guess it depends on the type of investor. But if it's investors in general, there's some interesting conclusions we could come to. But let's go ahead and look at this a little bit more and see what's going on. Home Union, an online real estate investment management firm, has announced that single-family rental investors, so renters, are beginning to leave Denver as low cap rates, plateauing rents, and rising home prices decrease desirability of property acquisitions. Okay, that's interesting. If that is starting to happen, and we are starting to see that being the truth, what can you conclude about that? Not only are investors not buying, it sounds like some who had already invested might be cashing out on their properties, but we don't need to speculate there. What we can say is whoever's running the numbers, and obviously it's more than just a few, they don't see a top side to this proposition. They don't see enough growth in rents to warrant purchasing now, or enough return to purchase now and become a landlord. Quote, and this is from Steve Hovland, director of research at Home Union. Quote, from an economic standpoint, Denver is quite strong. Employment growth should outpace national levels, especially among the trade, transportation, and utilities sector. However, price growth and compressed cap rates are making this market less attractive for investors. So compressed cap rates just means lower cap rates. Or you can think of it sort of as a rate of return, right? We've talked about cap rates here before. And cap rate and rate of return, in some cases, are loosely referred to as the same thing. They're not quite. But the point is the return. If you want to look at it in more general terms, it's return. Additionally, we're going to see higher levels of competition for tenants as apartment developers bring thousands of new units online this year. Denver is a seller's market in 2017. Here are some key takeaways on the Denver investment housing market. Now, number one, single-family residential rental vacancy in Denver is expected to decrease by 30 basis points to 6.7%. Rents for Denver single-family residentials are anticipated to grow to $2,097 per month, up 1.6% from 2016. Note, from what I recall, relating to prices in Denver, the last time we looked at them, that's not keeping pace with the cost of the single-family residential properties. Next, prices for investment homes in Denver ended the third quarter of 2016 at $327,000, with about 51% of investors choosing to use leverage. So that kind of, in other words, loans, right? So this exodus is interesting to note. If investors are leaving, not getting involved, that indicates to me they're not optimistic about where the market's going to go in the future. So they're looking to go elsewhere. If they're correct, and you're interested in the Denver market, a move like this could be the first sign that something is about to soften. It would be a very early warning. I wouldn't expect this to happen anytime really soon, but it's an indication of a softening marketplace. Now, anecdotally, we've heard from a lot of different listeners in Denver who have said what is being said here. Finding a place to rent in terms of an apartment is super easy. Lots of stuff floating around in terms of trying to lock in tenants for apartments. What's interesting here, though, is that they sort of make this interesting connection between single family residentials and apartment complexes coming online. And I guess that's a valid point to make, but only insofar as the difference between what it costs to rent a home and what it costs to rent an apartment makes it so much of a financial difference that folks are willing to put up with all of the crap that goes along with living in an apartment. We've talked about that before. Apartment living is the least desirable form of living. I've lived in an apartment. I know how much it stinks. The very first apartment I lived in, within 48 hours of me moving into the apartment complex, an apartment 1 story up and 6 down, got raided by the police because someone was cooking meth in it. That is my apartment experience. I've lived in other apartments and hated it. I hate having to park where you're living in an apartment, always fighting for a spot if you don't have assigned spots. Everyone knows I hate not having a washer and dryer in an apartment. I hate having to use the communal laundry. I hate it. And so do most people who live there. I hate having people above me, below me, to the left of me, to the right of me. It's a pain. So if you see it as a fair trade-off, everyone will want to live in a more single-family residential style scenario if they can swing it in terms of financials. So I think the point that's being made here is that you've seen a cap sort of get put on top of how far single-family residential rents can go, simply because at some point people are going to say, I can get the same number of bedrooms in an apartment. I can get a 3-bedroom apartment. I'm renting a 3-bedroom house, but I could save $1,000 in this apartment. Well, people might do that. Now, are those ridiculously huge numbers? Yeah. But I'm willing to bet people are going to be willing to make that trade for less than $1,000 a month. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on Denver. We've now talked about New York, which has been ridiculously softening. Denver's now showing some signs. We had signs in Miami that we were talking about late last year and a little bit earlier this year. More stuff to kind of add to the pile. Definitely some interesting brain food to digest and see where you feel like the next big deals in real estate might be coming from. All right, folks. I think we have delivered on the promise today. I think we've absolutely delivered enough great stuff to bounce around in your head to compensate you for your valuable time being spent listening to the show. Maybe I'm a little bit too high on myself at the moment, but I think we did it. I think this was a good one. As always, I truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. Thanks for coming by, and I'll talk to y'all next time.